bicycles, a 4,500 euro armchair by a US designer named Charles Eames, a second-hand Piaggio scooter, and an apartment in Marrakesh. In the click of a computer mouse, millions of French this week were suddenly privy on the government's official website to the private wealth and assets of all 38 cabinet members in President François Hollande's socialist government. Now, the public declarations were part of an unprecedented transparency drive ordered by Hollande after his former budget minister, a man named Jérôme Cahuzac, admitted that he'd lied about having money in a Swiss bank account. Now, Hollande campaigned as an adversary of the rich, and he insists that the public declarations are meant to, in his words, moralize French politics. His critics, though, including the socialist president of the National Assembly, scoff. They say it's crude voyeurism, masquerading as political virtue. Why is it that the French seem to have a harder time talking about money than about sex? Is there anything wrong with the rich, even the super rich, being a socialist? And why do other countries seem to have far fewer hang-ups when it comes to money and transparency in public life? A lot of questions for my guests tonight, who I want to introduce now. First of all, on my right, Aurore Gorius. Thank you for being here. You are a journalist with the French weekly magazine, Le Nouvel Observateur. You work on the website. Thanks for being here. On my left, Jacques Terray, Vice President of Transparency International France. I think that pretty much explains itself, that title. Joining me via Skype from Washington, D.C. tonight, we have Bruce Stokes. Bruce, thanks for being here. You're the Director of Global Economic Attitudes at the Pew Research Center, and you'll also, later on, also be giving us some of the views from how the U.S. Sees what's going on here. I want to begin, though, actually, with you, Jacques, because the words everyone's been talking about are transparency, democracy, more openness here in France. At the same time this week, we have had a tremendous backlash against these public declarations on the internet. We've seen that 8 ministers in Hollande's government are millionaires, and we've also seen that 8 other ministers barely make what the average French household makes. There's a great gap. The French are having a lot of trouble talking about it. Why?
The reason, I think, is with the Catholic roots of France. The Catholics, as you may know, are somewhat awkward about money. Everything should be for the poor, and the rich somewhere have betrayed their mission. And also, if you are rich, it means that somewhat you have cheated people.
You're suspect. There's something suspicious about making too much money. You couldn't have been honest.
Yes, absolutely.
Aurore, would you agree with that? That there's something a little dodgy, you would say, about
yes,
having...
and it's taboo in all the society. French people don't like to speak about money, but in politics, on the left, the politicians are very suspicious because it's based on the belief that if you earn money, you cannot be honest, and it comes from speculation or exploitation of workers who worked very hard to earn money. So it's very grounded in the left part of the politician on the left part. On the right, it's not really easy to recognize that people earn money. It's difficult too. But
even on the right, it's not just a left issue.
Yes, yes.
Interestingly, now look, you mentioned on the left, we have a socialist president here
Yes.
in power right now in France, François Hollande. He campaigned unabashedly on an anti-rich platform. I want our viewers to just listen to something Hollande said. He was speaking at a rally at an airfield, Le Bourget in France. Back in January 2012, he was campaigning for president at the time, 4 months before the elections. Here's what he had to say.
Mon véritable adversaire, My real enemy doesn't have a name, or a face, or a party. He'll never run as president, and so he'll never be elected, although he does govern. My enemy is the world of finance.
François Hollande's enemy is the world of finance. And earlier in 2006, he had actually said that the rich are his enemy. Yet, on the declarations we saw this week on the website, his foreign minister, Laurent Fabius, declared over 6.5 million euros in wealth, $7.8 million, I think that is. That is one rich socialist. Is there a problem with that, Jacques?
I think his electorate did not think that it was a problem because they know him. They have seen him around. They know how he lives in Le Havre and in his constituency, and they don't care. So we all were afraid that it could raise a lot of discussions, and it does not seem that it does.
I want to introduce now a guest who's just joined us. Eric Lisann, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
You're going to be our de facto legal advisor. You are a U.S. attorney, former prosecutor,
yes.
And you know France and the U.S. very well. We've been just listening to François Hollande in his campaign bashing the world of finance. And I'm wondering if you see any contradiction in a socialist president having so many millionaires, 8 to be precise, in a cabinet of 38 people. A socialist president, one who bashes the rich, multimillionaires.
Well, it's always been said that the French and the socialists in particular have nothing against money as long as it's inherited rather than earned. It's only the earned part of it that seems to bother a lot of these people. By American standards, that's not a huge amount of money for some people that are in public service, even $7-8 million. Of course, by normal standards, that's quite a bit of money. If we compare it with some types of people who leave the world of business to go into so-called public service, it's really nothing. But is it hypocritical to bash the system that makes other people wealthy at the same time that it allows people to be wealthy from other ways of service? Yes, absolutely.
I want to bring Bruce Stokes, who's been waiting patiently over in Washington, into this debate. But Bruce, just first, I want to show our viewers the results of a survey carried out by a national Sunday newspaper here in France last weekend. And basically, it was showing what the public's attitudes towards this public disclosure is. Look at those numbers, because they surprised me a little bit. 63% say that this disclosure is necessary. Now, look at that bottom number, 85%. That is a correct figure. 85% expect their politicians to be rich. What do you make of numbers like that? I'm not sure if you're familiar with this survey, Bruce. It was widely circulated here in France. 85% expect their politicians to be rich, and yet we say that the French have a real problem with wealth and money.
Well, I do. I'm not familiar with that survey, I must admit. And I would say probably here in the States, although I've never seen those exact questions asked of our population, my guess is that they expect politicians to be fairly wealthy as well. I will, to add to the earlier conversation, though, I think another issue that contributes possibly to this debate now in France is that our surveys show there is an enormous concern about inequality in France today, actually much higher than in many other European countries. And I think that this concern about whether our politicians are hiding their wealth may be amplified a bit by this concern about inequality.
And Bruce, now that you bring up that income, that disparity there, I'd like to actually show our viewers some more figures. This wasn't from a poll. These are figures of the wealth and assets, the differences between the average net worth of French families versus the ministers. If we could bring those figures up, because there is quite a gap. I'm told that it's coming up, but the net worth, basically, of the French ministers, the ones who declared, there it is now on our screen. I'll tell you, Bruce, if you can't see it from where you are. Ministers average 913,549 euros, which where you are well over $1 million, maybe $1.5 million. The French average, and that's for a household, is 229,300 euros. And I will note that the median for the French. That is, half of French families make much less than that, about 115,000 euros. And what's shocking about it, and Bruce, I want to stay with you, is that 919,000 figure for the ministers is brought way up by the few ministers who are millionaires, but there are a lot who are way far down. Even within the cabinet, there's a great disparity. Is that surprising?
No, because actually here in the States, you get some of the same disparities. You have multimillionaires in the cabinet, those who may have spent some time on Wall Street or in big business, and they are contrasted with people who may have spent their entire lives in public service or in academia, where their net worth may be the house they own and a pension plan, and that's about it. So it is, one always wanted to be a fly in the wall of these cabinet meetings when they're talking about what they do on their vacations or what they did on the weekend, because my guess is there's huge differences in what these people do in their spare time.
Let's talk a little bit more about that spare time. Aurore, I want to turn to you because I was mentioning before the figure that the median French earning net worth is 113,500 euros. In the declarations we saw this week, the public declarations, we have one minister, Delphine Bateau, she's an ecology minister. She declared just over 100,000 euros. She and 3 other ministers own no property, no real estate at all. They'd be considered poor by the standards of many politicians.
Yes, maybe. But I think about François Hollande during his campaign, I think it was very well seen because the enemy, the finance, who is the enemy, was a good idea because in France you can have money, but you can't show it. And if you have a lot of money, you don't show it. And the former French president, Nicolas Sarkozy, did show how much he liked money.
He showed it quite often.
Yeah, quite often.
We saw him on the yacht.
On a big yacht.
Famous businessman here.
Yes, and so it was an example that really shocked French opinion. And today, François Hollande tries to be different, and so I think it's now he has to prove how different he is, and it's quite difficult.
It's interesting, Eric, because what we were just talking about with Nicolas Sarkozy, the French had a word for his whole style. They called it bling bling. Bling, bling. It was a very flashy style. He was once photographed, I think, with a Rolex watch someone said was worth 35,000 euros. In the U.S., you've worked on both sides of the Atlantic. In the U.S., people might actually admire that. They might actually aspire to that.
What would they might admire is somebody who's pulled himself up from his bootstraps, maybe started with nothing, as is ironically perhaps the story in Italy with Berlusconi. So supposedly he waited tables or he was a bellman at a hotel, and then of course nobody admires acquiring wealth in an illegal way, however the wealth acquired. But if you work your way up through the ranks, that's very much the American success story. And then people don't mind at all that money has been accumulated. But where there's a perception that the money has somehow been accumulated in a way that's unearned, and this is the big difference between the American and the French attitudes, that's where problems are run into. Now today, of course, Wall Street does have an enormous image problem because many people think that the stratospheric earnings of bankers and other people in the financial services industry that are centered around Wall Street are in fact getting money that are way out of proportion to any value.
Which is a different issue because we're trying to limit it a little bit here to the political class. Yes. And while we're doing that, I just want to, not to bore you with more statistics, but I do want to bring up even some more figures on our screen. And this time I want to show what the average pay, and then I want to ask Bruce Stokes about this, the average pay of deputies in the French Parliament versus ministers in the French government. First number is the parliamentary deputies, 7,100 euros. That's in euros for those of you in the U.S. watching. So we're talking over $8,000, well, over almost 9,000. Salary of the ministers is almost 10,000 euros. How does that compare to the salaries we see over in the United States if you're a lawmaker in Congress, Bruce, or say if you're an Obama cabinet minister?
Monthly. Those are monthly salaries?
Those are monthly. That's monthly. Take home, yeah.
A cabinet officer in the United States would make about $180,000 a year. So that would be over $12,000 a month. A member of Congress would make roughly about the same amount. So both people in the executive branch at the senior level and people in Congress would make a good deal more.
A good deal more, okay. Not an exorbitant amount more, but a good deal more. Jacques, Transparency International. Transparency is in your name. Here is a question I have been having. I looked at the declarations of these ministers. I see the figure I just showed our viewers, 10,000 euros a month almost. And then I see that they are declaring very, very little, some of them, in assets. We mentioned one minister, only 100,000 euros in assets. Where is their government salary going? What are they not declaring something? Where are they spending this money? 10,000 euros, Jacques, a month.
It's true to say that they've just become ministers a few months ago. So, so they did not accumulate.
So they're starting to accumulate the money now.
And I don't think that they will accumulate because, as you say, the American parliament members and government are spending much more on political activity.
Okay.
And I think maybe parliament people in France and ministers should be paid more.
More, as okay.
In order to have a true activity with their constituencies.
I want to ask, we have little time left in this half. Aurore, I want to ask you, some of the ministers, socialist ministers who declared their wealth, one of their fears, there was one minister, Michel Delaunay, she's the second richest, 5.2 million euros. She fears that now that people know how much she makes and they know she's rich, she will have it harder time doing her job. This is what she wrote in the French newspaper Le Sud-Ouest. If we could bring that up. She said, it will come up in a second perhaps, what I question is the public nature of the measure. Our devotion to work, fiercely honest, disciplined work, now it risks being heaped with opprobrium. She will be seen in a negative light.
Yeah, maybe because it's French people don't like their politicians to be rich. So to be rich is not is seen as if you're not honest, and that's a real problem.
Which
now.
we were saying before.
Yes. So we can. Wonder if it was a good idea to ask ministers to be transparent, and a lot of politicians think that it was not a good idea.
Not a good idea. We're going to be talking more about that in the next half and also look at what they do in other countries. We are going to be taking a short break now. We're going to give you a little bit of news, and we'll be back momentarily with more on France and then looking beyond France to what other Europeans are doing here on The Debate.